Okay, so we are going to hit our last section for the cognition chapter, and we're going to talk about language. And obviously, this is just how one communicates with another. It is imperative to psychology, as this is the method for which we interact with one another. It is essential in how we process information, how we think about things, how we communicate our thoughts. And so what we're going to do is we're going to study some essential aspects of language. And then once we have done that, we are going to talk about some ways in which our language develops and some theories that follow along with that. So simply put, let's just start with some of the basics of language. Phonemes and morphemes. These are just some of the basic units of any language. Phonemes, as it says, the smallest units of sound in a language. So if you are thinking of phonemes in the English language, we have a lot. And so there's about 870 different phonemes in just human speech, and English has about 40. Some examples of that would be the ch sound, or the ah, or the t, or the b sounds. Those are, all of that is involved in our speech, and those are as it says, the smallest units of the sound. So morphemes are, as it says, the smallest unit of meaningful sounds. These are small bits of our language that have some sort of meaning. So let's give some example. Ed would be an example. You put this at the end of of a word. Pre, talking about this happening beforehand. Ing would be another example of a morpheme. So just make sure that you can recognize the difference of a phoneme and a morpheme. Phoneme is just the smallest unit of sound, really just looking for the sound, and the morpheme is looking for the smallest unit of meaningful sound. So we're looking at grammar, and grammar is simply the rules of the language, what you are, the way that you say things. When I was teaching in Thailand, this was, really, really big. In Thai, there's a lot less structure to the way that the language is spoken and written. It has much more fluidity. And so when anything was translated over from Thai to English, like periods and commas, like get that out of here, that was not needed. So each language has specific rules on how it is spoken, and that's just the grammar of it. Now, specifically, we have a type of uh, an area of grammar known as syntax, and this is the order of the words in a language. So you can get this especially with Spanish and English. Um, you know, English, whenever, just kind of the word phrase, like, or sentence structure is completely different from that of Spanish and from other languages. And so when you have people that come in from another country here, sometimes when they're, learning the new language, it's difficult for them to say things properly, and you can just catch it super easily, just because of how we used to our language we are. English is a terrible language. I told all my Thai students that. It's just so difficult and so meandering and crazy. And, we technically have grammar rules, but they're all terrible. And, English is hard. So, okay. So that's grammar. Easy peasy. So, what we are going to spend the rest of our time looking at is how we actually learn language. What is the process of it? And so we have three major theories that look at what does this process look like, how does it end up happening, and how does that influence who we are. So the first of these theories that we're going to look at was created by B.F. Skinner, and simply put, this is the way that, once again, this is how a person grows and develops their language. And it's basically dependent upon reinforcement. So we talked about reinforcement in the last chapter when we were looking at learning. And basically, B.F. Skinner says this: the way in which we learn language depends on the response we get from the things that we say. So if a simple example would be, the first time you use a curse word in front of your parents, how do they respond? Many parents would respond in a negative fashion. Oh, you shouldn't say this, blah blah blah, get spanked, get yelled at, whatever. And um, for B.F. Skinner, what he postulates is that that is a learning for the child, a recognition. Okay, I should not say this thing anymore because there are consequences for it. Okay. Now, on the flip side, you have, positive reinforcement. You have a baby who says their first word, mama or dada or whatever, and the parents freak out. They're so excited. They're so happy. And so that reinforces the child to say things in order to get that positive response from them. So all of it is tied back to this reinforcement and punishment in order to get a specific response. So that's a social learning theory. So next we have Chomsky's nativist theory. And I really like this theory because it brings up a lot of like interesting thoughts. Um, and it is what is known as the inborn universal language acquisition device. So as a child, or more of as a baby, you have the ability to learn any language. Doesn't matter where you're born from. If you were born in the US, you can learn Chinese. You can learn whatever really difficult language, so long as you are taught it. So a child's vocal cords, a baby's vocal cords, have not fully developed. And so when you learn a specific language, once that thing is set, when you get older, your all that stuff is ingrained and has developed to speak in this certain manner. That is why when you try to switch over to another language, you may have some difficulties with certain sounds. So for Mr. Monk, the rolling R in Spanish is very difficult for him to do. He just has trouble getting his mouth in order to move in the right way in order to get that rolling R sound. I'm not even going to attempt it. But this is what the nativist theory is that you, as a child, you could learn any language you want. And so for a while, it was believed that um, the best time to learn a language was as a child, and to learn multiple languages is as a child. While people now agree that it is a good time to learn a language, um, it is also just as easy to not as easy, but as you are also just as capable of learning a language when you are older because you have more experience and you're able to do stuff better. So the older you get, you still have no excuse not to learn another language. Finally, we have Whorf's linguistic relativity. Love this theory. This one's super weird. So basically, Whorf's linguistic relativity says this: language determines the way that you think about things. Okay, neat. So what does that mean? So what Whorf did was he went out to the Pacific Islands, and he ran into a tribe known as the Hopi tribe. And in their language, they had no past tense. So they had no way of expressing things that happened in the past. For us, we have certain ways to be like, well, that happened back then. Um, or ways that are morphemes that we put into the language in order to indicate past tense. But in the Hopi tribe, they did not have that language, and so things that happened in the past were more or less forgotten. Not that they couldn't think about them, but they had no way of expressing something that happened in the past. So things that happened in the past were not long dwelt on. They were not long thought of. Everything was in the present and in the future, simply because they had no way of expressing something that had happened in the past. Okay, so that is all that you are required to know for language. Good work. This wraps up the cognition unit, and you guys are well on your way. Almost done. Only one more chapter to go. Good work.